How are you? Am I good to go?
You're good to go. Thank you so much.
All right, great. Thanks. Hey, everyone. How are you all doing today? I hope you guys are feeling a little bit settled. These are ridiculously crazy times. And so, one of the reasons I did this program is to help people stay safe or feel safe in a world that isn't safe. And just a little bit about who I am and what I've been up to. I've been a registered nurse for a little over 30 years now, and my specialty is high risk OB. For first half of my career, I did acute care. The latter half of the career was spent in home care. And then a couple years ago, now I don't know, you all may resonate with this a little bit. I tended to have a little bit of a hard time letting go and controlling too much. And my gut was telling me that there was somewhere else I needed to be, but I didn't know where that was. And I decided I was going to throw caution to the wind and listen to my intuition and just leave work. And the past few years in doing that took me a while to figure out what it was. But during that time, it was very emotionally unsafe. You know, I'm single and don't really have a family. I didn't have a support. So I had to figure out ways to feel safe within my own skin without having anything to fall back on to kind of control. And that's where the new self care came from. Okay. The new self care, another reason I did this is because in these times of COVID, right, I see all these webinars and I've popped in on a few and I understand how you all working out there. If you're working 12-hour shifts, at least if I was working a 12-hour shift and not your typical work day and coming home, I would not want to spend an hour doing self-care. I'd want to hang with my family and just unwind. So what I'm going to ask you to do, and this may be a little hard, but I tend to look for the gift and the curse of everything. And so I'd like you to try to consider COVID an opportunity to be vulnerable and intentional and deliberate. And I see a typo there. I was going to put intentional despite not wanting to be, but this is really a good time to learn some self-care skills that aren't your traditional going to the gym, working out self-care. Today's presentation, at the end, I will give you some self-care shortcuts for physical activity, but a lot of this is more mindset, all right? So I'd like you to try something with me. If you can do this with your eyes open, eyes shut. Just want you to take a breath in, and as you breathe in, push your belly out. We're going to do diaphragmatic breathing. And we'll just do a couple cycles. All right. So close your eyes. Breathe in. Good. Blow it out like you're blowing out through a straw. Good. Breathe in again. And blow it out. One more time. Breathe in. And blow it away. Great. So now, would you all consider that self-care? How do you define self-care? Again, traditionally, self-care is I'm going to the gym. I'm like, okay, I used to even do this. I'm getting my nails done. That's self-care. And that's not really self-care, right? I mean, it's self-pampering. The new self-care that I'm talking about is where we're going to like learn to actually feel what's going on in our bodies. And by doing that, we're going to gain self-trust and we're going to be able to self-regulate. And self-regulate is, there's something in a couple of weeks, I'll be talking more about chronic toxic stress. But chronic toxic stress it happens when we're like triggering fight, flight, or freeze a lot, right? And I'm just imagining how often in the situation you all are in on the front line that fight, flight, or freeze gets triggered. So self-regulation is learning to go, ooh, wait a second, what is that in my body? Okay, my heart's pounding, I'm feeling a little nauseous. Let me take a few breaths and slow it down because that chronic toxic stress over time actually makes us sick. a lot of autoimmune disorders, heart disease, lung disease. So with the new self-care also, you'll have improved interpersonal relationships. You'll have a better relationship with yourself because you're going to feel safe in your own skin, which allows you to be more vulnerable, more authentic, because you're going to yourself to let you know, to tap into that intuition and let you know when it's not safe. Um, the tools that I use in the new self-care are the tools of self-awareness, right? And self-awareness is, I like to cut to the simple of things. We tend to overthink things, but self-awareness is just taking notice of what's going on in your thoughts, your body, your perceptions. Mindfulness, mindfulness is helps you be present in the moment. Okay. And whereas meditation, you use the breath to calm you down, mindfulness, you don't. Mindfulness, you're just watching the breath, but you're not really manipulating it. Okay. And then between self awareness and mindfulness, then you can get to self regulation. And at the end of the day, the goal is to help you feel safe in any moment, in any situation, to be able to pull yourself into a state where you're not in fight, flight, or freeze. So when I started this practice, I thought of something called Your Star, right? And so it's really hard. I don't know about you, but years ago I was learning meditation, and that's when I first realized I was paying attention to my breath. I'm like, oh my God, I hold my breath most of the day. I wasn't even breathing properly. So I came up with I'm a star, and I would set my phone every half hour for it to go off, and I would just do this. And so I would just stop. I would take a few breaths, just like we just did. And then I would just check in with myself and go, what am I feeling? Am I sad? Am I anxious? Am I nervous? And then I would just reset and start again. And it was amazing how this simple practice, again, just doing it every half hour, and it only takes a minute or two. So if you forget anything what I tell you today, remember I'm your star, okay? And whenever you're getting stressed, just go, I'm a star. She said I'm a star. So you want to do that little practice. The goals of what we'll be talking about today are self-awareness, self-connection, self-inquiry, self-regulation, and mindfulness. And again, self-awareness, wow, it sounds like it'd be really simple, right? It's a difficult process, but it's also a really fun process. Like a lot of nurses, according to the research, I was codependent, which means I grew up in a house with addiction and then went on to marry an addict. But I tended to block a lot of things out, right? When I was out in the world, I was fine, I was authentic. But at home, I had the armor on. And one of the things we'll talk about in a minute is when you have the armor on, not only does it not protect us, it blocks your stuff from coming out and it prevents you from being aware of what's going on in your body. All right, so that's a huge, another takeaway besides I'm a star would be self-awareness, which is tied into I'm a star. So what is self-regulation? If you haven't heard of this term yet in healthcare, you'll hear it soon. Because with trauma-informed care and you have our childhood experience study, self-regulation, co-regulation are terms that are going to become really popular. So emotional self-regulation is the ability, not ignore, not deny, your emotions, thoughts, and perceptions, right? So these are things like, all right, I'll give you a perfect example. Right before this webinar, I talk a lot and I'm good with talks. But for me personally, it's really hard. I have a hard time talking with the slide deck because I don't see you all. And so for me, that throws me into fight, flight, or freeze, right? So right before the webinar, I get anxious, and emotional self-regulation is not letting myself go into that downward spiral. It's saying, okay, hold on a second. And it's just kind of reframing and taking notice and pulling myself into a state of calm instead of anxiety. Behavioral regulation is the ability to act in accordance with your long-term goals. This just means knowing what you value, knowing what's important to you, and whatever you do, doing things that are in alignment. And yeah, you definitely know when you're going against what you believe in and what you're aligned to do. It's not a comfortable feeling at all. Um, and, it's funny. One of the things I realized is that when all my life, I lived my life two different ways. And when I was with my family, I had the armor on. Life was not good. It was a struggle. I was in my head all the time. And when I went out in the world, though, it was totally different because I just felt free to be me. And when I was free to be me, life was good. Things flowed, things came easy. I was always coming from my heart, not my head. And so, what I realized, though, is that when I lived with the armor on, that was not who I was. That was not what I wanted. I wasn't in alignment with who I was. And at the end of the day, I realized I did have a lot of anger, disbelief, shame, and guilt, and it had nothing to do with anyone else. It was because I hid myself, that I was angry at myself. So that's all part of self-regulation. Um, let's see. Oh, yeah. So self-regulation, me too. You can't regulate if you can't see yourself. And so in order to see yourself, we have to take this stuff off. It serves, it's funny. I wish I could see hands, maybe in the chat. Um, how many people wear the armor at work and they think it works, because sometimes you think it works superficially. I interview nurses and I talk to them for our strategy calls, and almost every single nurse spoken to, I said, well, what do you do with negative emotion? And I don't remember them teaching this in nursing school, but the same words I heard. I tuck it in this little box, and I'm like, okay, that box doesn't go away, right? But the armor, yeah, the more vulnerable you can be, the more true to who you are, um, the easier it is to self-regulate, the easier it is to connect with people, and more importantly, the easier it is to connect with yourself. Again, when we hide ourselves, sometimes we hide ourselves so long that we can't see ourselves. And that's where self-awareness really will help you tremendously. If you have any questions, just throw them in the chat and I'll be more than happy to answer them. So self-care, the new self-care is all about you. Yes. I once had a t-shirt all about me, but it stands for the purpose of this. It had acknowledge, connect, embrace yourself. HEART is an acronym I came up with. Everything I do with my business is HEART. It's honesty, empathy, acceptance, relatability, and trust. And the way HEART came about is someone once said to me, why don't you teach people what you do? And I said, what do I do? And he was talking about how on the streets I would just go up, and I was really vulnerable. But I saw that as a strength. And so he actually made me think what it takes to go out of your way and talk to people you don't know and put yourself out there. And that's where HEART came from. So you got to acknowledge yourself, connect with yourself, embrace, and then you've got to have honesty, empathy, acceptance, relatability, and trust with yourself in order to do that. When you put those two things together, then you end up with self-care. And self-care can be strategies to empower living free. And for this, we put I think we had in times COVID affecting resilience and emotional wellness. You'll see later on in the presentations to help you out a little bit to remember some of the stuff we talk about. I gave care a different acronym. I gave self-care a different acronym. And later on the presentation, I'll actually give you little things to do with the acronym self-care. Okay? So ACEs. Under ACEs, acknowledge. What I mean with that, the first step in self-awareness is take what's going on around you. Okay, so if you are at work and you're in the ER and people are just coming in quicker than anyone can handle them, right? Just real quickly go like, okay, this is what's going on, right? And I'm safe. This is okay. It's what's going on. But it's just acknowledging the situation and all these things I'm going to tell you to do. Each step takes like a fraction of a second. Like it looks like a lot of information, but when you put it together, you may be talking like a minute or two. That's why I call it shortcuts. It's your go-to for when you're just feeling like you're losing it, you know. Um, Best case scenario is this is your go-to throughout the day, even when things are good. So you're going to acknowledge what's going on around you and in you. You're going to connect with that, any feeling that you have. The worst thing you can do for yourself, whether it be at work, with your family, with your kids, worst thing you can do is deny a feeling. And that's usually the first thing most people do is because we think, I'll pretend it's not there. Look, and I am the queen of this when I was with my family, man. I pretended so well that like it's ridiculous. But you've got to connect with whatever you're feeling. Because if you pretend it's not there, it doesn't go away. It just, if any one of you, excuse me, if you've heard the book, The Body Keeps the Score, I can tell you that is so true. And I can never pronounce his name, Vandersalt. But what he said is that whatever negative feelings you're repressing, you're not letting out, they get stored up in your tissue, your organs, your cells. It becomes part of chronic toxic stress. And I personally experienced all that. Oh my God, it's been very cool actually, because now my mind's okay. I got to get that old trauma out of my body. And so I do Reiki on myself. And you should see some of this stuff that the body, I can see the negative energy. It kind of looks like if there's an alien in my abdomen. Most bizarre thing ever. Oh, you know, while we're talking this too, if you're at the bedside and you're feeling really stressed out, now I tend to break rules, but I don't see any problem. If you need to do, I'm a star, teach your client it, teach the patient, ask them if they want to do it with you, because you're going to be teaching them these amazing tools to get control of their emotions. All right. Again, not deny, not negate their emotions, just to have a little control over them. And ironically, I use the word control. In order to get control, you actually have to let go, if that makes sense, right? The more we try to control, the less control we have. So if you can let go, that's when you notice that you start to get a little bit more control back into your life. Embrace the moment. Man, this one can be really, really challenging. Um, some of the things, and embracing the moment means that, okay, I am here and John Doe needs a ventilator and we don't have any, and this one's going downhill quickly. And okay, so how do you embrace that moment? Just appreciate the moment of what it is. And a lot of the stuff I'm talking about, I don't know for anyone who does do mindful or lives with mindfulness out there, it's really hard to describe the feeling. But once you start practicing it, you'll see that in the worst of times, you can bring yourself to a peaceful state, right? Now, the peaceful state may only last for a couple of minutes and you have to do it again. But the cool thing is, you know how to bring yourself to a safe point within yourself, regardless of. So that's what embrace the moment means. Um, I'll talk a little bit later, some tips that I figured out to help me do that. And then self soothe. So I don't know who's single out there. I've been single for about 10 years. I miss hugs. I'm a hugger, right? I hug strangers on the street with their permission. Um, and if you ever want to do that, I'll tell you what works really good. I think it was a Harvard study that studied hugs, and they showed that for thriving, you needed 12 hugs a day. Basic survival, you need eight, and or sorry, for maintenance, eight, and survival, you needed 4 hugs a day. So when there were times I needed a hug, my oxytocin needed like to be charged a little bit. I would go up to a stranger. I'd say, "Hey, you know what? You want to hear this really crazy study?" And I would tell them, and I'd say, "Do you get 12 hugs a day?" They're like, "God, nowhere near that." I said, "Would you like one?" And they're like, "Sure, I'll take one." So if you need a hug and nobody's around by a stranger, try that one out. It works really well. I don't think I've had anyone turn me down. So self-soothing, now in COVID, right? If you're like me, we're in trouble because there's nobody to hug out there when you go on the streets. So I live alone. The only option is to hug myself. So I do that every night. Sounds a little crazy, um, but I do. I hug myself. Self soothing, also, I know you can't hug yourself at work, but what you could do is when you're feeling really stressed out, just touch your hand and caress it. Like I'm showing a lot of stuff. I wish you could actually see um, a bigger picture of this, but you can touch your hand. Another thing is if you touch your lips, that kind of brings you to the moment and connects. Another good one would be to touch your tongue to the tip of your mouth, like to the upper palate, right? These things kind of bring you back in the moment. So that's what ACEs is. Acknowledge what's going on around you and in you. Just connect with the feeling, right? Embrace the moment. Look for the good, even if you may have to stretch to find good at work, but embrace the moment and self soothe, right? So let me just, because something popped into my head, embrace the moment, look for the good. Is if you're at the bedside and things are all heck's breaking loose, the embracing could be, I'm so glad I'm not here by myself. You know what I mean? It's looking at the positive instead of, it's looking at what's right instead of what's wrong. That's what embrace the moment is about. So the next slide. Um, I just go into, so what I did on these, I start out with the acronym, and then I would break the acronym down and tell you what each letter stands for. And then I'm going to go through things underneath that letter. All right. Um, then you see this online all at one time. It'll make more sense than what I'm telling you. But so some of the things you can do under that section, acknowledge the situation beyond the star, right? When you're acknowledging a situation, nursing, you're assessing the situation. And one of the things that can really easily throw you into being in the moment and seeing the positive is get curious. Start asking questions to yourself. Um, Heart is funny when I talked about heart, the concept, curiosity kind of goes with heart. And I went to a conference once following my intuition, because it was in Mexico and it was really nice. It was a retreat, but they talked about all the childhood characteristics. And that's when I realized that what I kind of did when I was out in the world that helped me stay present and let me feel safe in my own skin, um, in areas that were not safe, right, was because I maintained those childlike characteristics, right? Honesty, empathy, acceptance, relatability, trust, and curiosity, adventurous, all those things. If you can do that, man, I am telling you, it made life so much easier than not living with those characteristics, right? So that's just the first question I've always asked myself over the past past few years when it's been really challenging emotionally. I've gone through and uncovered a lot of old trauma. I blocked out 7 years of my childhood, right? So it's been a really challenging couple years. And there are times I felt like, oh my God, I felt like a little kid going, where's my mom? But are you safe, right? I cannot tell you that question whenever you are feeling stressed out. Just ask yourself, am I safe? And then after the first few times, just, am I safe? I would start telling myself that. Whenever I get stressed, it's like, okay, you know what? I'm safe. I'm safe. I got you. I'm safe. Now, if these things sound really woo-woo for you, trust me, before I started this, I was not like hippie-ish or whatever, but these things actually seriously work. Um, they really do work, and they are so simple. Um, I used to teach my clients. I didn't know when I was back working in home care, I didn't know the full breadth of what I do now. But a few of the things I would teach these women who were high risk and low income, a lot of stuff going on. And they told me these things worked for them. They loved On the Star, you know. So do the On the Star, assess, get curious, ask yourself, and then tell yourself, I am safe. I got your back, right? The next thing you want to look in a situation is, can you change it? Because if you can change it, what can you do? If you can't change it, then how can you make the best out of it? The other thing is significance. Sometimes we blow things out of proportions. Like something seems like it's a really big deal in our life. And one of the phrases I started asking myself is, okay, in the scheme of things, really, like in the next 20 years, how big a deal is this? Is it enough to warrant as upset as I'm getting over it? And the answer is usually no. Um, and then another thing, this may not be so much for work, but like when you're going into work, right? If you're getting a little anxious of what you're going to face, go, okay, what's the best case scenario? What's the worst case scenario? So if you've got 5 patients coming in the ER bay at one time and you don't have enough staff to handle them, just go through your head. Okay, best case, what would I do if this happens? All right, what's the worst I would do? Because when we get anxious and when we feel really stressed out, it's usually one of two things. We're looking back in our past and we're remembering something, anticipating that happening again, or we're projecting and doing the like, well, if this happens, and we're looking ahead. And so if you go into that place where, all right, if this happens, instead of worrying about it happening, pretend it is. If it is happening, what's the best, what's the worst case scenario, and how will I handle both? Because once you see that you have a solution, then it takes that fear of the unknown out of the situation. All right, I might have beat that too. Sorry about that, guys. All right, connect with the feeling. All right, this one. I don't know. Most of the nurses I know were like me, and when I was with my family, and just, well, let's put it this way, I got it. No problem. I'll handle it. Those were my mantras for years. Um, and here's a little tidbit from all the nurses I've spoken to over the years. I think it would be a safe general blanket statement to say a lot of us have attention deficit and a lot of us are really creative. And so the dopamine at work, we love that dopamine, right? I miss that dopamine. When I look back on nursing, I mean, one of the my favorite memories is on a gurney with someone as they're rushing back to the OR. That's a little crazy if you're not a nurse, but if you're a nurse, you probably understand that, right? So we like the rush and that type of emotion, but we want to be able to acknowledge all different kinds of emotions, sad, anger. It's okay to get angry. That's why with connect with the feeling, just want you to know that it's okay to feel bad. It's okay to have a negative emotion. A lot of people will say to me like, well, I felt bad. I'm like, that's okay. It's normal. But the cool thing about feeling bad is when you know how to get yourself out of that feeling bad. So one of the things that helps you get yourself out of that is to acknowledge it and then name it. If you can identify what it is you're feeling, and a cool thing, I had a lot of trauma growing up, right? And then even in my marriage, my personal life was not as good in the world, right? So one of the things I did though is like you get used to that fight, flight, or freeze, the sympathetic system kicking in, right? Um, I realized a couple years ago, I didn't know the difference between fear and excitement. Crazy it was. I was talking to someone on the phone. It was a great phone call and something good was happening. And I got off and I'm thinking, why am I really anxious? And I'm going, wait a second. I think that's excitement. And I mean, silly, I was 50 something years old and I didn't know the difference between excitement and anxiousness. So when you put a name to it, it makes it much easier. Feel the deal. I'm not going to beat that one again, but you've got to, once you feel whatever it is you're feeling, then you can let it go. If you don't feel it, that's when we tend to not be able to let go of things and we ruminate and they just go on and on. But if you feel it, give yourself permission to say, yeah, I'm really sad. We all have moments. In COVID, this is really tough. Even at home, you're kind of trapped. And one of the things I do each day is I give myself a certain amount of time to have a pity party, right? Like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, depends on the day, depends how I'm feeling. But I actually give myself a time. I say, all right, for this amount of time, you can feel bad, do whatever negative emotion you want. But once that time is up, done. You have to bring yourself out of this. So, and curious, we talked about also. Let's see how we're doing. I wish I could talk to you guys, so we'll do it afterwards. Embrace self, own it all, which means you don't want to pick and choose what parts, what feelings you take a look at or what you accept. When you develop self-awareness, inevitably you are going to find out things about yourself that you don't like, right? Because we all have a good, a bad, and an ugly. We're all human. I think one of the worst times was when I realized, I read an article once and I realized I was passive aggressive. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my God, So there's going to be ugly, but there's going to be more beauty than there's going to be ugly. So just own it all. No hiding from yourself or anyone else. Ask, listen, and learn. I write to myself all the time. I talk to myself too. I don't answer, right? But get in a habit of asking yourself who you are. In this ACEs plus Heart, the new self-care is all about becoming truly your best friend. I want you to start pretend that you are a new guy you're dating or a girl you're dating, right? How in that beginning, that fun period when you're getting to know someone, well, get to know yourself. You're dating yourself now. And it is the coolest feeling when you truly connect with yourself. It's just very awesome. But ask yourself questions and answer them. And if you know you're answering them, it doesn't mean you're crazy. It just, you can answer them silently. So nurse thyself. Man, we are not good at this, are we? I practice what you preach it never used to be one of my mantras. So whatever, let's put it this way, whatever you're doing and however you're treating yourself, if you would not recommend that to a patient, don't do it, right? I remember coming home from work at times when I worked in the hospital, and I just wanted someone to validate me, right? That I worked really hard. I knew I worked hard, but I wanted some validation from the outside world. So I would say to my family, oh, I didn't go to the bathroom for 12 hours today. And when I started self-awareness, I was like, oh my God, that's crazy. What would you do if a patient told you that? or if a patient told you that you had to microwave your meal like 10 times, not during COVID times, it's a little, but on a normal day, right? There are things a lot of us nurses do that we're not our own best friends. We're kind of making ourselves sick with like the chronic toxic stress. And again, we'll get into that in a couple of weeks, but hopefully you'll come back to that. Nurture and calm, right? Maybe I love it. But now that I know what now I know what calm feels like, I really like calm. I love that internal calm. My head may not always be calm with thoughts with the ADD, but my body, and I'm just like there in the moment. Nurture yourself like you would nurture your patients or like you would nurture your children. You know, no one can have too much of nurturing. So how are we doing on time? All right, I'm speeding up because I'm way behind. All right, dealing with honesty, empathy, acceptance, respect, and trust. I'm not going to, all right, I'll read them quickly, but I'm not going to go into them. Honesty, say what you feel what you say, be true to you despite others' dismay. The result of a life not lived as you is a lifetime of hiding, feeling unsafe and blue. Okay, a poet I am not, but I was just trying to get out the message that you really need to be honest with yourself and be true to who you are. Empathy. When life gets complicated and there's too much stuff, the drive to do and not, the drive is to do and not to be. Okay, I'm definitely not poet. The drive to do and not to be often comes from feeling not enough. Walk in your shoes as an observer would, avoid regrets and the dreaded shoulds. Validate equally both the shine and the scuff. Be rest assured you're more than enough. Basically, this is just saying we need to cut ourselves some slack. We're pretty darn good, and we need to give ourselves credit for all the good we do. Acceptance, we're running on time, so I'll let you read these on your own, but this is just accept where you are. One of the things when we wish to be somewhere we're not, then there's a lot of cognitive dissonance and we get really frustrated. Respect, same thing here is that if and I'm talking family members here, if they see you not taking care of yourself, they're going to treat you the same way you treat yourself. I learned this the hard way. So treat yourself like you want those around you to treat you. All right, strategies. Straight spine. These are now in the moment what you can do. All right. Think of it when you're sitting straight and your shoulders are back, you feel more powerful. And do it now if you would for me. Sit up and just roll your shoulders back. Okay, see how it feels? Feel a little more confident. Now slump over instead. So think of it this way, when you straighten your spine, you expand, right? When you hunch, you shrink and you feel weak and defensiveness. So first thing you want to do when you're feeling stressed out is straighten your spine. Then you want to, okay, inhale first. Because of the acronym, I had to put exhale first. So breathing deactivates the sympathetic, and you want to activate the parasympathetic. That's why diaphragmatic breathing is good, because when you push your belly out and then when you pull back in on the exhale, right? So when you're breathing out, you're flattening your stomach, your ribs are coming to your back. That triggers the vagus nerve, which allows you to slow down your breathing, right? Another tip I didn't put in here, yawning has been shown to do the same as breathing, and to pull yourself out 6 breaths is usually what research has shown that it resets the stress cycle. All right. The next part of self is language. Here's the I am safe, and it's just watch the way we talk to ourselves. You can talk yourself into seeing what you want to see, and you can talk yourself right into a self-fulfilling prophecy that, I don't know, you're alone, nobody supports you. Say it long enough, and we actually end up behaving in ways to prove to ourselves that that's true. Feel, we talked about the senses, also tangible objects. So not only can you touch yourself, but if you're trying to stay in the moment, you're stressed out, notice sounds, smells. Go, all right, let me name 3 things that I can smell, 2 things. And these things are really quick. Again, they really do work. Care. All right. So coherence. I'm not sure if anyone's heard of a company called HeartMath. They came out first, I believe, with heart coherence. Heart coherence is heart rate variability, and it's about bringing yourself into a state of calm. And the purpose of doing that is not, the brain and the heart work together also. And so this research showed that when we're in calm states, when we're feeling safe and we're feeling calm, that the energy, the heart actually submits positive energy for a 3-foot radius around us. So have you ever gone into a room and you're really drawn to somebody? And that's probably they're in heart coherence. And or contrary, if you walk in and someone you just like their energy isn't good, they're more in a negative coherent state. The second thing on care you want to do is an attitude of gratitude. Now, this and breathing are the 2 things that saved me in the past few years, and I never would have believed it. But gratitude, just waking up in the morning going, I mean, sometimes I really have to stretch at the moment, go, thank you for the blankets again. Thank you for my coffee. Thank you for just noticing what's good. And I have some stories I don't have time to tell, but some really cool stuff happens when you start doing that. And I notice a difference in my days when I don't start the morning and I don't thank just the air, saying thank you for the sun. I mean, it's crazy stuff that works. Recognize and reframe, that's a whole thing again about the language. Once you become self-aware, you got to notice what you're saying to yourself and then reframe it, and challenge it. So if you're dissing yourself about something, I don't know, that was I was so stupid, go, really, was it? Like, what else could you have done? Just challenge. Energy is very huge. If you're ever feeling really blue, just stand up and just move, bounce, get the energy going. That's also very important. um, okay, we went through these. There's some emotions, heartmath.com, I think it is, a very cool site if you want to go on, and they have some practices there. So if you look at the heart rate variability, incoherence is right here, the red. It's kind of spiky. If you're in heart coherence, it's more of a smooth. Um, I was at a physician's once doing some testing, and they had the the heart math monitor that they put on me. And so I thought I was calm at the time, and it was a little off, but I thought it was relatively calm. And this monitor, you can actually purchase one for your phone. It's like $100. It'll show you whether you are in green, red, or yellow state of fight, flight, or freeze. And I thought that I was in a green state where I was a yellow. And it was really cool because all I had to do was work on my breathing for a couple of cycles, and I brought myself back down in the green. So that's the self-regulation. All right, next thing we will talk about, sorry guys, the mouse. Oops. Gratitude we did. And recognize and reframe. Again, I'm just breaking it down. One of the things that's really cool once COVID's done and you have some time is to do myth versus truth. What are things you believe about yourself? And then what's the actual real truth? Energy, we talked about, move the body. And I mean, so self-care shortcuts, if you're at the bedside, obviously you can't do exercise, right? But you can just like lift your leg up, flex your foot. Like used to do, now I'm a little different than people, right? But I mean, I used to do like kick my leg back to little leg lifts in the line at the grocery store. People look at you a little strange, but then when you tell them what you're doing, I used to get people to do it with me. Okay, so everything I'm telling you to do here, ask your patient if they're coherent, if they're, healthy and healthy enough to do this stuff. Teach them, because I am telling you, it's such a difference in life. Just these very few small things. Um, so if you combine all these, they're going to help you with authenticity. They're going to help you with awareness, mindfulness. They're going to let you feel safe in any situation because you feel safe in your own skin. And you will be self-regulated. You'll know how to self-regulate. And again, the importance of that is to minimize the consequences of chronic toxic stress. All right. Shortcuts. These we're going to go through. How are we doing on 146? I think we might be heading Q&A time soon. No? Okay. Team huddle. In today's times, this may not be realistic, but in normal times, like if you get during report in the morning, like right before, take a minute or two and just like have everyone just start the shift with breathing and like one thing, gratitude. You know, really good thing. Sometimes it's hard for us to ask for help. So identify a person that you're working with that day that you will ask for help, even if it's something silly, just to get in the habit of asking for help, right? Get curious, say to yourself throughout the day, I have your back. I have to yourself, right? Ask your patients to join you in all the stuff we talked about, the breathing, gratitude. I mean, these are easy things that sound weird, but they really work. And it's amazing what a difference it can make. Even with pain, I've used breathing to take away the pain of a really bad sprain, right? Greet the elephant in the room means like if you're really anxious, um, you know, I don't see anything wrong with saying to the patient, you know, like I'm just, you know, it's okay to be honest with a patient in your feelings as long as you're not falling apart on the floor crying hysterically, right? Like, but I broke the rules with my clients and I talk to them like a woman, not as a nurse. So I would say, look, you know, I experienced this once and this is what worked, what didn't. But what that did, I think, is it made them feel less alone. And when we are able to share what we're feeling with other people, what I found over the years is that gives somebody else permission to say something which normally they might be afraid to say because they wouldn't want to be judged, right? Um, Talk, touch, vulnerability. These are like bringing human back type of interventions, you know, which in times when it's crazy, but it only takes a few seconds to, you know, to touch someone's hand and take a breath or two with them to calm them down. So these things, all right, now listen, I'm going to be totally honest with you. When I started self-awareness, my kids were in their 20s. I wasn't so successful in getting them to join me in all this yet. One day they will, but they weren't young enough that I could like, you know, make it fun for them. So, but some of the things, just involve your kids. If you want to come home and do a little yoga, or you want to do a little breathing, or you want to journal, get your kids to do it with you. Because in all honesty, these tools, which are giving you like they're more than resilience. Resilience is is surviving. These are the things that are going to give you the mindset and the mental toughness that you can get through anything because you don't have to depend on anyone but yourself, right? Like this is helping you feel safe in your own skin. So, and, all right, these are important. Mindset shifts. I think we are in this very moment, what's wrong, right? When I'm like a little anxious, I stop myself and I go, in this very moment, what's wrong? Nothing is usually wrong, right? So these are just things to bring you into the present. When anything happens that is a little challenging or it's not what I wanted to happen, I just look for, I just say to myself, okay, what's the lesson? Look for the lesson. Makes it a little more fun. Don't take anything personally, right? And another thing is, okay, that's not about patient yells and screams, you get upset. It's not about you, it's their stuff. Self-care. At the end of the day, you need to be able to see you and to look in the mirror at the end of the day and say, you know what, I see you, I hear you, and I accept you, like where you are right now, today. That's kind of really important. And it's amazing when you're able to do this stuff, how you see the world change around you, you know. Um, when you're feeling down, get down and exercise. That didn't come off real good there. Write a letter to yourself if you're stressed out. Huge one, promises. Do not make promises or commitments to yourself if you don't think you can seriously follow through. I've done that my whole life, particularly with the attention deficit, right? We think you can do more than you can. But what we're doing is every time we commit that we'll do something and we don't do it for ourselves, we're losing trust in ourselves, which makes us doubt ourselves and feel less confident that we can have our backs when times are tough. So we did that in the scheme of things, experience the moment, right? These are just some definitions. Emotional intelligence, self-awareness plus mindfulness. Resilience is the ability to bounce back. And from, in my opinion, it's just surviving. Whereas mental toughness are those daily practices, everything we talked about here, for growth mindset and the ability to thrive. The Adverse Childhood Experience Study is the webinar we'll be doing on June 16th. And that you'll be amazed. Oh my God, this one's amazing. It may answer so many questions about who you are and why you are the way you are, and some of the illnesses you may have right now. Self-awareness, just taking notice of yourself, and the goal is to be the objective observer, to look as the outside world sees you. Meditation, we talked about, it's just manipulating the breath, and all you want to do is still your mind, right? Just want to get your mind quiet, which is impossible, but with everything else, the key is to notice, oh, I had a thought, let it go, and just go back to breathing. Mindfulness is how you maintain self-awareness, right? Mindfulness is walking down the street and looking at like the color of something on the ground. Yoga helps a lot with trauma, and yoga connects the mind and body, and the goals are control, calm, clarity, and connection with yourself. And I think that's it. Take it away. Are you there? Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank you so much, Leslie. I really appreciate it. Okay, guys, I want to point this out, and then we're going to go ahead and I have a handful of questions that we're going to go ahead and tackle. To receive credit for this course for nursing, you will be receiving an email by Friday with instructions for accessing and completing the necessary information to receive your 1 hour of CE credit. If you do have additional questions, you can contact Elite at 1-888 857 6920. With that email, it will give you instructions on how to receive a copy of this recording, also a copy of the slide presentation, and then directions on getting that 1 hour of credit. So please wait for that email. And if you have any, if Friday comes about and you still don't have it, then please go ahead and call us there at that phone number. Okay, so Leslie,
Yes.
what skills make us able to take the armor off? Do you have any insight on that?
Yeah, I do. You know, taking the armor off, it's a lot of it is self-talk, right? And so when I did this, I was just like talking yourself into going, you know what, it doesn't matter what anyone thinks about me. Because that's why we, a lot of times initially, like most people wear the armor, and we wear the armor because we don't want people to judge us and we want to be accepted and liked. And there's nothing wrong with that. Everybody wants that, right? But I would do things with the breathing, just say like, you know, I am, do the I am safe. Think of a mantra like, it's okay if not everyone likes me. It's okay if they judge me, because it really is, right? Like, um, it's a self-talk, writing to yourself, and also doing the what if thing, right? So write to yourself, if I take the armor off, what is the worst that's going to happen? Like, what's going to happen if I take the armor off? You know, and thinking how you would handle it if you do take the armor off. Breathing is going to put you in the moment, and it's connecting with yourself, touching yourself. It's all about self connection and feeling safe enough with you. And you'll get there with the mindfulness, the breathing. It doesn't happen overnight. I have to be honest with you. It's going to take like probably for being in the moment with the breathing, that happens immediately. But as far as feeling comfortable taking the armor off, it takes a while. It took me months with my family to do it. But I would say just figure out why you have the armor on. A lot of us have it on from childhood, particularly if we did grow up with families with some type of trauma or dysfunctional environment, where we found it wasn't safe to say or do things and be ourselves. So you got to make it safe to be yourself. And all the things we talked about today, start with one or two, and then slowly work your way. And those are the things that are going to get you comfortable to let the armor down and just go, you know what, this is me. I know no matter what happens, I can have my back. And it's okay if people don't like me. And if it's okay if they judge me. So it's everything we talked about today. All the things are in the slide deck. Just pick one or two to start with.
Thank you, Leslie. Opening yourself up is very difficult. Fear of rejection or failure. How do you accept the openness?
You know, when I started this practice and when I started living life with heart, I was 16. I knew I didn't feel connected to my family. And so I got my license and I went out in the world seeking connection, right? I would drive down the streets and I would look at people and go, and this really helped. Well, I wonder what they have in common with me. You know, I wonder, are they married? I took whatever was my situation and I looked at a stranger and I went, do they have the same thing? And believe it or not, over time, and it's funny with everything that's going on with the racism today, I think that's how I learned not to see color because I connected with people I wasn't even in the presence with. So I would start looking at people and asking those kind of questions to yourself, not to them, but to yourself, just so um, the unknown isn't so scary, you know, and going up to people, I have to be honest with you, I approach strangers all the time in different countries too. Never in all the years has anybody ever said, go away, weirdo. I saw in the corner with homeless and I do some things that are kind of crazy. And I look back and now that I've gone through the past 3 years, I think really what it was is that vulnerability and the authenticity let other people feel safe. And so I saw the best and the worst of the people by being vulnerable. So in order to not care about that stuff, you have to make yourself feel safe in yourself and start looking at other people and just going, okay, so what happens if they don't like me? What's going to happen inside me? And you'll find that nothing, right? Like, um, but it's all, I hate to say this, but it's all about learning that you're enough. And one of the things I did was in the mirror every night, I did a practice where I would say 7 things that I was proud of, 7 things that I forgave myself for, and 7 things that I committed to myself. And to be honest with you, the commitment thing, I usually did one because like I'm not very good at with the ADD and following through on things. But it could be the same 7 things. You know, I did a lot of inner work with writing to myself was amazing. I mentioned I blocked out 7 years of my childhood and I couldn't figure out what happened during those times. And the way I discovered it was writing to my inner self. And all of a sudden the stuff just started coming out. It's crazy.
Thank you. Now, what about situations when you need to self-soothe but cannot disconnect from what is going on around you?
So the breathing, right?
Yeah.
You can breathe with your eyes open. breathing is the first go-to because that's going to reset the stress center, the sympathetic. So just slow the breathing down and breathe in through your nose and then just breathe out. And you want your exhalation to be longer than your inhalation. Do that 6 times. That automatically is going to pull you into a state where it'll trigger parasympathetic and it'll go into rest instead of the sympathetic. The other is if your hands are free, just and I can just like touch your arm and kind of like caress your arm, because not only is that bringing you in touch with the moment, but it's working with the nervous system too. Like when we don't feel safe, when we're anxious, all that, our nervous system is really anxious, and it's kind of on high alert. And so the idea is to calm down the nervous system. Breathing, repeating I all the time I say in my mind, I'm safe. I got this. I got you. I'm safe. It all boils down to feeling safe. Even the vulnerability question, the reason it's hard to be vulnerable is because we don't feel safe. But the reason we don't feel safe is because we've hid ourselves for so many years. We don't trust ourselves. So everything with this is building self-trust, right? So make little tiny promises to yourself that you know without a shadow of a doubt that you're going to be able to follow through on. It's building trust within ourselves. And again, there's nothing wrong with us. Most of us have done this. It's just that trust issue is huge. Once you trust yourself, then you'll trust the rest of the world. And that's what happened when I would go. I think what I realized was happening in the world is that I would let a homeless person in my car. I worked in some of the poorest areas of Philadelphia doing, I would stop fights, like just get out of the car, not even thinking of it. But I also knew there were a couple times over those 15, 20 years that I would go up to someone and all of a sudden, nurses, girls, guys, this, your gut goes, don't go, right? And so I would listen to that. But the problem is when you've got the armor on, you can't hear that. Our body is always giving us clues all the time. Problem is we don't pay attention to them. And the only way to pay attention to them is to slowly take off that mask, which is difficult. Whoever asks that too, if they want to reach out to me, I'll be more than happy to talk to them further about that.
Wonderful. And then we did have a lot of questions here, or a lot more questions. We'll be sure to get those answered after the fact here. Thank you, everybody, for those. We're already 5 after the hour. One person said this, and I just really I thought this was a good place to end it. She actually received a fortune cookie and couldn't get rid of it because of what it says. It says, fear is just excitement in need of an attitude adjustment. I
Love
think
that.
that.
Yeah,
Yes, me too.
I do love that. Thank you for whoever sent that in because I didn't end that too well. But yeah, thank you. And for anyone who's watching today, I think my email address is at the end. Please feel free to reach out. I mean, this is a hard topic to cover in an hour, but it's really relevant to not only COVID, but what's going on in the world today. Yeah. So anyhow, thank you so much.
Thank you, Leslie, and thank you, everybody. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and hope you come back real soon. Thanks, everybody.